So thank you all for joining us for our presentation titled Advancing Menstrual Justice, Recommendations for Environmentally Sustainable and Inclusive Policymaking. So my name is Liera Duca and I work together with Carla Liera. We're both researchers at Stockholm Environment Institute, and we think a lot about climate justice and just transitions, but also about gender justice, backlash, and greenwashing. And in policymaking around menstrual justice, these two, the social and the environmental motivations, they come together, and we see a lot of potential for improving policymaking around menstruation. So in the next 4.5 minutes or so, we'll speak about how we understand menstrual justice, how menstruation is currently being addressed in policymaking, and then we'll present 5 recommendations for making menstrual policymaking both environmentally sustainable and inclusive. Next slide, please. Our point of departure was Margaret Johnson's definition of menstrual justice. They define menstrual justice as opposed to menstrual injustice, so the oppression of menstruators, women, girls, transgender men and boys, and non-binary persons simply because they menstruate. So this approach is great because it recognizes physical health in relation to socioeconomic conditions, and because Johnson applies a structural intersectionality lens. Next slide, please. So to this, Amory and others added mental health to the health-related dimension, a 6th on security and personal safety, a 7th on environmental justice, and actually an 8th that we missed to include in the PowerPoint on state power and the law. But current policies are unable to uphold menstrual justice in all these dimensions.
Now we're going to focus more on the environmental part of the environmental justice. So traditionally, the link between sustainability and menstrual health in the environmental discourse has focused on environmental impacts caused by disposable menstrual products. I mean, while addressing this menstrual waste is critical, it's often narrow in scope, failing to consider broader social and environmental sustainability issues. Next, please. For example, in Latin America, current policies have shaped a narrative that unfairly blames menstruators for environmental pollution due to plastic waste from menstrual products. This approach, again, overlooks the larger systemic failures in managing waste. So now we will jump into doing the recommendations for environmental, sustainable, inclusive policymaking. Next, please.
Yeah, so now we present 5 policy recommendations. Next slide, please. The first one is understanding the environmental impact of different menstrual health products, context specific and from manufacturing to disposal, to allow consumers to make informed choices. This will prevent companies from greenwashing menstrual products, promote transparency, and allow consumers to make informed choices. Next slide.
The next one is to enhance the design and implementation of menstrual waste management systems. By adopting socially acceptable and environmentally responsible disposal options, we would provide menstruators with the means to manage their products in a way that is both safe and sustainable. This initiative not only tackles environmental issues, but also enhances social acceptance and supports individual dignity, because it goes beyond having the product with themselves and having to take care of it. Next, please.
So we know that menstrual experiences are unique and shaped by numerous factors, such as gender, ethnicity, cultural practices, and so on. We need to understand how norms and beliefs shape unhealthy or unsustainable practices, which perpetuate stigma and limit product and disposal choices, and then challenge these in menstrual policymaking. For instance, menstrual blood is seen as dirty and is not supposed to go on the ground in some cultures or be visible to others, which then impacts the choices people make. On the other hand, menstrual policies can create and exacerbate stigma. For example, disposable products, despite their significant environmental impact, remain the only because general cheapest and most accessible option for many menstruators, but is very stigmatized. Next slide, please.
We need to also understand the effects of climate and environmental changes on menstrual health practices. So, for example, we need to explore how the lack or excess of water can impact the practices of people who use reusable products before promoting the actual use and uptake of these in such a massive way. And we also need to understand how the most vulnerable will be impacted by these environmental hazards. Next, please. And last but not least, we need to establish quality standards for menstrual health products to ensure they are safe for both people and the environment. The reality is that today we know very little about the content of the products we're using, which can be concerning as it may be harmful for both our bodies and the environment. And although very recently international standards for these products were established, it remains to be seen how effectively manufacturers will adopt and implement these standards. So this was our last slide. So next slide, please.
You're out of time, so just wrap it up, please.
All right, yeah. So then thank you very much. That was it. Thank you.
Amazing.